Ukrainian representatives say the revisions to the plan reflect their national interests. The initial 28-point plan faced criticism for appearing to favor Russia. Now Ukrainian officials say the new plan safeguards security in the short and long term and underscores energy stability and reconstruction. Let's bring in White House correspondent Karen Travers and ABC News contributor, former UK national security official Steve Hill for more. Hi to you both. So Karen, what's the latest from the White House on these talks?
Diane, the president is certainly continuing that optimistic tone that we heard from Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday. The president posting on social media this morning, is it really possible that big progress is being made in peace talks between Ukraine and Russia? The president continues, Diane, in that post and says, don't believe it until you see it, but something good just may be happening. Now, it's important to note here that the talks this weekend were not between Russia and Ukraine. It was the United States and Ukraine, as well as European officials. And you heard Ian Pannell say there that the Russians say they haven't received the latest plan and hadn't gotten a full update on what transpired in Geneva. So at this point, it is very critical to note that this is the United States and Ukraine having these talks, but there are still very big steps that would still have to come when the Russians then get involved. The things we're looking for, of course, this week, does the president get on the phone with President Zelensky and potentially President Putin to try to push this forward? That deadline the president set of Thanksgiving for the Ukrainians to accept a deal. Already there's wiggle room from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who said that the deal, the deadline for the parties to reach an agreement at this point is, quote, as soon as possible.
And Steve, a high-ranking Ukrainian official tells ABC News the U.S. has threatened to halt all assistance if Ukraine doesn't agree to the proposed deal. What do you make of that?
Well, both sides are trying to avoid the blame for this process failing. And I think the president is using sticks and carrot on both sides. Unfortunately, he seems to be using fewer sticks on the Russians and more sticks on the Ukrainian side. Coaxing them towards a realistic, pragmatic position has to be the right thing. If he took away that intelligence support, as he's done temporarily in the past, that would be debilitating, and it would relieve the pressure on the Russians, unfortunately.
And Steve, the European Union expressed concern over parts of the proposal, including Ukraine having to cede land to Russia and limit the size of its military. Do you think Russia would accept a deal without those points?
Well, that's the problem, is that the gap between the two sides is massive still, particularly on territory. The Ukrainians still haven't really accepted what one suspects is inevitable, which is that the Russians keep the territory that they've already captured. But the Russians asking for territory that they failed to capture over the last 3.5 years also seems absolutely unrealistic. That's not, I suspect, where the answer will lie. The Ukrainians and I don't think militarily give up that land. Secondly, in terms of sovereignty, Russia would like a weakened, vulnerable Ukraine, limits to its army, no NATO membership, and that will not be acceptable to the Ukrainians. So there's still a huge gap between the two sides.
Karen, meanwhile, the Trump administration is adding Venezuela's president and government to its list of terrorist organizations. The FAA is also warning pilots about flying in Venezuelan airspace. What message is the administration trying to send here?
Certainly one of intimidation and pressure on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Diane, last week the president was asked about the potential of ruling out U.S. troops on the ground, and he said, I don't rule anything out. We have to take care of Venezuela. The president had also indicated 10 days ago that he had sort of made up his mind about what he was going to do with this situation, but has not indicated publicly what direction he is going in. You mentioned that today the State Department is designating Maduro and the government there a foreign terrorist organization because they say that Maduro is a narco-terrorist, something that he, of course, denies. And then you have that added indication there from the FAA about warning to take caution when flying over that airspace because of heightened military activity and what the administration is saying is a worsening security situation.
Karen Travers, Steve Hill, thank you both.